Hi everyone, Crista Cowan here with another episode of the Barefoot Genealogist. Today we are talking about rating your genealogy sources. So some of you have just gotten into the habit of actually attaching records to the things that you discover about your family tree. And some of you are learning how to actually analyze those records and make educated decisions about how to grow your family tree. But I continue to get questions every day about conflicting sources. When one source says something about a birth date or how to spell a name, and one source says another, how do you decide what information is accurate? Well, in Family Tree Maker, there is a way to actually rate your sources, and it's going to walk you through a process that a lot of genealogists use to be able to determine or evaluate what information is accurate, what information is inaccurate, and what information we just don't know and have to make a decision about. And so that's what I'm going to show you today. I'll walk you through what's called the evidence analysis map. It was put together by Elizabeth Shown Mills. If you are not a follower of hers, I would highly encourage you to do so, and I'll show you where you can do that. We'll walk through that evidence analysis map, and then I'll show you where in Family Tree Maker you can go to actually rate your sources, and we'll walk through a couple of examples so that you have some idea about how to do it for yourself and what benefit it could be for you. So let's go ahead and dive in. Let's first walk through this evidence analysis map. So this is what this is that you're looking at here. Again, this was put together by Elizabeth Shown Mills. She wrote the book Evidence, and then she wrote the book Evidence Explained. She has a website. The website is called evidenceexplained.com. Here is that, and you can go there. And she has samples of how to cite your sources. This particular evidence analysis map comes from her Quick Lesson 17. Her website is full of really, really rich, detailed information that can help you become a better genealogist. Anybody who wants to become better at family history should follow Elizabeth. And you can follow her on Facebook, or you can just come here and spend time on her website. I follow her on Facebook, and every day or two she'll put out little challenges, little genealogy challenges that help us to understand and analyze evidence a little bit better so that we understand what it is that we're looking at when it comes to records, and how those records help us collect information and how that information leads us to evidence. So let's go over this map really quickly. So the first thing that we're looking at is sources. Sources are something that all of you should be familiar with, or if you're new, you're becoming familiar with. Sources are things like a census record, or the information that your Aunt Sally told you, or a family Bible, a birth certificate, a website that has an index, a death index on it, whatever, right? Those are sources. And sources can be categorized in a couple of ways. Those sources are either original or derivative. So an original source means this is the actual original census record, or Aunt Sally herself told me, not Aunt Sally told someone who told someone, right? Or a derivative source would be something like an index, so a death index, where you're not looking at the actual death certificate. That's going to be a derivative. And then authored sources are something a little bit different, and I won't get into that today. We're just going to focus specifically mostly on original and derivative sources. So it's important to understand what the source is that you're looking at, because that is going to make a difference in how you determine the validity of the information or not. For the easiest example I can give is indexes. So on Ancestry.com, let's just come over here, and I'm going to use the state of Texas as an example. Ancestry.com just released a large collection of Texas birth and death records last week or the week before, and I've spent a lot of time in them recently. So I come in here to the card catalog, and I type in Texas in that title field, and that is going to show me all of the Texas records. As a matter of fact, I'm actually even going to narrow this down a little bit more. I'm going to type in Texas death, and we're just going to look at the Texas death records. There are two databases here. on Ancestry.com that have Texas death records. And they cover, for the most part, they cover the same time period. They both start in 1903 because that's when the state started keeping vital records or death records at the state level. The death index goes through the year of 2000. The death certificates only go through 1982. That's all that the state would share with us. The death index has been online at Ancestry.com since 2000, so it's been online for about 13 years. The death certificates just went online a couple of weeks ago, okay? So most of us, or many of us who've been doing Texas research, have been using this death index for a really long time. So I can come in here and I can type in the names of one of my Texas families and see that, here are these records in the death index, but that's all they are. As a matter of fact, even if I click on this original image, what it is an original image of is the state's death index, right? So that's all the information that I get is a name, a county, and a date of death, and then a certificate number. There's no additional information. And so this is not an original source. It's just a derivative of the original source. Somebody looked at the original certificates and created an index from that. Okay, now here I have the actual certificates. So when I come in here to view this record, there is an original image, and when I click on that original image, it actually shows me an image of the actual death certificate. Okay, so that's kind of an easy way or an easy example of the difference between originals and derivatives. There are actually hundreds of examples, so we don't have time to get into them, and I don't want to confuse the issue too much. But if you can, I would strongly encourage you to purchase Elizabeth's book or visit her website, and she goes into a lot greater detail about the difference between original and derivative records. Okay, what that leads you to then next. So you have your source and you've made a decision, is it an original or a derivative? Now, that source provides you with information. Information is judged by the informant's level of participation or knowledge about a particular fact. So is their knowledge primary, first-hand knowledge, or is it secondary, second-hand knowledge? So think about all of the different facts that a specific source can be attached to. When you attach a record, you attach it to the name, and sometimes the birth date and place, and sometimes the death date and place. Maybe there's military service or arrival information or departure information. Lots of different facts or pieces of information that are included on a particular record. So then the question is that information primary or secondary based on the informant? Now, when you're looking at a death certificate, it's a fairly clear-cut, well, sort of, a fairly clear-cut thing, right? So in this case, if I scroll up here, there is an actual informant listed on this death certificate, okay? The informant in this case is Eldon Becker. I happen to know that Eldon Becker is Minnie Hulda Becker's son. So he is her son, and he has primary knowledge of her name, right? That's information he knows. Her date of birth, however, he does not have primary knowledge of. Since he's her son, he probably was not present at her birth. As a matter of fact, she probably never even had primary knowledge of her birth because while she was present at that event, she probably wasn't conscious of the date. So you have to think about who the informant is and whether they have primary or secondary knowledge of each of the events. Now, could he have primary knowledge of her date of death? It's possible, but we don't really know, right? We don't know if he was actually in attendance at her death or not. So maybe, maybe not, right? She's listed as widowed, so her marital status. I would bet that he has primary knowledge of her marital status. It lists her parents' names, her father's name and her mother's maiden name. Now, does he have primary knowledge of that? I don't know. Were they alive when he was alive, or did they predecease? Did they die before he was born, or before he was old enough to know them? And so again, you have to analyze this record based on who the informant was and what pieces of information they have either primary or secondary knowledge of. Now, in this case, a death certificate has primary information about a date of death, usually not just because of the informant, but because if you scroll down, you're also going to usually find information about an attending physician. In this case, there was an inquest held into her death, and so there might be some additional information you could go find, or some additional documentation you could find. It looks like a justice of the peace signed the death certificate. We've got a signature here of the funeral director. So a lot of people were participating in the information provided on this particular death certificate. So you have to make a decision. Is the information on this death certificate, each piece of information, primary information or secondary information based on what you know about who provided the information on that document? Okay? And that's important. If it's primary information, chances of it being accurate are greater than if it's secondary information. Same thing if it's an original or a derivative source. Chances of it being more accurate increase if it's an original over a derivative. Okay, the final category here is evidence. Evidence, according to Ms. Mills, is based on relevance of information to the question and the degree of explicitness. And so here's what that means basically. Does this document answer the question, the genealogy question you have? Okay? And does it answer it directly, or does it answer it indirectly? Okay? So let's look at a couple of examples. Again, here is this death certificate for Minnie Hulda Becker. If the question was, what is her maiden name? This lists her father's name, and so that is indirect evidence that that is her maiden name. Nowhere does it say Minnie's maiden name is Noack, but it does list that her father's name is Herman Noack, right? If the question was, what is Minnie's date of birth? Her date of birth is listed. It doesn't matter whether it's right or wrong. The question is answered specifically here on this record. Now, if the question was, what is Minnie's father's name? This is direct evidence, explicit evidence that is her father's name, or her mother's maiden name, or her birthplace, or her date of death, right? So anytime you can ask a question and a piece of information on the document explicitly answers that question, that is direct evidence. Okay? Now, if the question was, who are Minnie Becker's children, there is no direct evidence on this particular document that lists who her children are. However, there is an informant listed, and we could use this indirect information with other information that we're able to gather from other sources to determine that this person is in fact her son. So think about the kinds of questions, and questions are a big deal in genealogy. I think sometimes we don't ask them often enough. I spend some time on the Ancestry.com Facebook page and group and out on the message boards, and very often I'll see people ask very, very vague questions. I want to know all about this. And then people start helping them, and they say, oh, well, I already knew that. Well, the deal is they didn't ask a specific question. And sometimes it takes 5 or 6 messages back and forth before they finally say, well, what I'm looking for is, what was her mother's maiden name? Or when did she arrive in the United States? Or, very specific questions. So we need to be better about asking specific questions in family history, not just because it's going to help us find the information we need, but because it's going to help us analyze the records we do find. Does this document specifically answer the question, directly answer the question about when Minnie was born? Yes. Does it directly answer the question about when Minnie died? Yes. Does it directly answer the question about who she married? No. but there is some indirect evidence that she married somebody with the last name of Becker and that he died before her because she is now listed as widowed. So again, get really good at asking questions so that you can determine, does this evidence provide direct or indirect information about a specific fact that you are trying to ascertain in your family tree. Okay, so that is Elizabeth Schoen Mills Evidence Analysis Map. Again, I strongly encourage you to go to evidenceexplained.com. You can learn a lot more from her, both on her website and on her Facebook page. And if you haven't purchased a copy of her book, Evidence Explained, it's something that I strongly believe should be in every genealogist's library. So I have a copy on my desk, and I also have a copy at home. I'm a little obsessed about it. Now let me just show you, in our last few minutes together, one of the things we've done in Family Tree Maker. And this has been around for a couple of versions, but I just want to show you how we've tried to automate this process or make it a little bit more intuitive for you. We give you the ability to actually rate your sources based on Ms. Mills' evidence analysis map. So I'm looking here at August Carl Noack. August Carl Noack is a cousin. He's a first cousin of my great-grandmother's. I'm going to come over here to his person page, and you can see over here on the right-hand side, I have sources, records that I have attached to this person, okay? And you can see, if you look here, you can see that for each fact, there are different sources that are attached. So for his name, I have 5 sources attached. For his birth, I only have 2 sources attached. For his departure date, he actually was born in Germany, I have 1 source attached, okay? So let's just look, we're going to use the Hamburg passenger list here. I already kind of did this a little bit, but I just want to show you how this source rating thing looks. So if I double click on this source over here, it's going to open up this full source. It's going to provide me with all of the, the link to the record and some of the citation detail, the reference note. There's the actual media or the image that's, when you have Family Tree Maker, if you're not familiar, it actually copies the image from Ancestry.com onto your computer. And so here I have a copy of it. I could actually click here and go to view the source online if I wanted to view it on Ancestry.com. If I wanted to add any additional notes about this particular citation, I could do that as well. It also tells me that this citation is linked to 4 different facts. Okay, and so I could go through here, it's listed, it's linked to his name, his gender, his birth, and his departure. So that one source, that one piece of information is linked to all 4 of those facts. So then here you can see, and I don't know if you can see this, hopefully you've made your screen full screen so that you can kind of see at least where on the screen I'm pointing to. For each one of these sources, there are some stars. And you'll see a little star here, and if you hover over it, it says Rate Source Citation. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the Hamburg just once, just to highlight it. Click on the Hamburg passenger list, and then I'm going to click this little star. And it pops up this opportunity for me to rate the source for this person. Now, I could just pick stars, right? 1, 2, 3, or 4 stars based on how I feel about this source, okay? But if you click this little button that says Use Standardized Ratings, Ancestry.com actually pops up some quality measures based on the evidence analysis map. So here, I can start to say, is this source original or derivative? Well, it's an actual original image of the passenger list. So I click original. The next one, and we didn't talk about this, it's actually an additional one in Family Tree Maker, is the clarity. Is it clear or is it marginal? What that means is when I look at that image, can I actually read what's on it clearly, or is the information unclear, right? Is it written so sloppy that I don't know if that date is in 1873 or in 1823. I don't know whether his name is Herman or Harold, right? So is the information clear or is it marginal? I'm not sure what it really says. Then the next one is the information primary or secondary? Now what you'll notice here is that I haven't actually checked either one of these things, and the reason I haven't is because on this passenger list, I don't know who provided the information. I don't know who the informant was. And so I don't know if they had primary or secondary knowledge. I don't know what knowledge they had of him and his information. There are a lot of census records that are that way. You don't know who provided the information to the census taker. It could have been the head of the household. It could have been the wife. It could have been the 13-year-old daughter. It could have been the farmhand. It could have been the next door neighbor. The 1940 U.S. federal census is the only census where, with a little X in a circle next to their name, the person who provided the information to the census taker is known. So I've left that particular informant or information blank because I don't know who the person is who supplied the information. And then the final one is evidence. Is this direct evidence or indirect evidence? Now remember, I'm on the name field. And if the question is, what is his name? This record provides direct evidence that this is his name. So now you can see that based on the things that I've selected, it's given a quality score of 3 stars to this particular record for this particular fact. Okay? And now I can see right down here. And if I did that for every single one of these things, it would give me a rating for that. Now I have to do that then for every piece of information. So I'm going to come here and you'll see here the same source, right? It's the exact same source, but I have to now rate it for the birth. Okay, so I'm going to use those standardized ratings again, and now I can just quickly go through it because I've already analyzed the record itself. So it is an original source. The information about his age, because I'm on the birth field, right? The information about his age on this record is clear. I don't know if it's primary or secondary, but the evidence is indirect. And here's why the evidence is indirect. The passenger list only lists an age. It does not list a birth date. So if my question is, what is August Carl Noack's birth date? This is indirect evidence for that piece of information. If my question was, what age was he when he immigrated? That would be direct information. But because I've attached this to the birth fact, it's indirect. If I needed to explain myself, right, to myself, often I need to explain myself to myself. I make notes all the time, everywhere, because I don't expect to remember information. I can make a little note down here in this justification field where I can just explain, he's listed as being 13 years old in September of 1873 on this record. And so I make sure I understand what it is that I'm looking at. So now you can see, because I've marked this indirect, for his birth information, this only gets 2 stars because of the way that we've rated the information. Now for his departure, same source, I'm going to rate this again, use my standardized ratings. It's an original, it's clear, and if the question is, when did he leave Germany? I have direct evidence that he left Germany now on the 20th of September, 1873, and now I'm back up to 3 stars because it's that piece of information that is there. Now we're going to look at, let's see, we've got time, it looks like, to look at 1 or 2 more. Another piece of information that we oftentimes find is Find a Grave information. And so here I have information from Find a Grave that I've attached to this particular person. And I'm going to go ahead and open this up, and we're going to walk through this. So here's the information, right? And this is a little tricky. You have to understand what it is that you're looking at. Find a Grave is information that people have collected and put online about where people are buried. When you look at that particular source, though, you need to understand if it's I'm going to go here and view this online source. You need to understand if what you're looking at is an actual tombstone, right? So here's an actual photograph of his tombstone. They've even photographed the entrance to the cemetery. So I have the name of the cemetery, the tombstone with that information on it, And then the person or one of the people responsible for this memorial has also added a picture. I have, however, seen plenty of find a grave memorials with no tombstone. So, again, you have to kind of make that decision. Is what you're looking at primary information, or primary source, or a derivative source? Or, let's try that again. An original source or a derivative source. If there is an actual photograph of the tombstone, I consider that an original source because the source itself is the tombstone that I am looking at photographic evidence of, okay? If there was no tombstone photo, if it was just a find a grave memorial that somebody put up and said this person was born and died in this place, they're buried in this place, that would then be derivative because they have copied that information from somewhere else and you're not able to examine the original for yourself. So in today's digital age, with photography, we're able to examine original sources like census records without actually having the physical piece of paper in front of us. Same thing with tombstones. If we've got photographic evidence that that tombstone exists and this is what it says, then we can mark that as an original source. Okay, the next question is clarity. So I come back over here to the tombstone. I can actually click on that image and make it bigger. Remember, what I'm looking for is the fact about his death, okay? So can I clearly read his death date on this tombstone? In this case, I can. If I was looking at the birth fact, I can clearly read the birth date. I can actually clearly even read the birthplace. Look at his name, though. August C. Noac, and then it's cut off. Not because it's probably cut off on the original tombstone, but because it's cut off on the photograph. And so his name is not clear for me to read. So again, depending on which fact you're rating this source for, you have to make a decision about, is the information clear or is it marginal? Now, because I'm looking at the death information, it's clear. Is the information primary or secondary? Well, I don't know who provided the information about his death to the tombstone maker. I could mark it secondary just if I felt like I had to mark something because I'm fairly certain I don't know if it's primary or not, right? And then is the evidence direct or indirect? Remember, I'm on the death fact, and the information on that tombstone directly answers the question, when did he die? Okay, so now I've rated that source, and again, it's got 3 stars. That's good quality information. So that's the process that I go through to rank or to rate these sources. And I used a really clean example just because I didn't want to confuse matters, but you're going to come across some really messy examples. You're going to come across records where one record may say one thing and another record may say another thing. And that is the part of the process where this becomes really important for you to be able to understand the source, understand the information or the degree of knowledge of that information, know whether that evidence in that record actually directly or indirectly answers the genealogy questions that you have about the person that you're researching, and then you have to evaluate. That's kind of the next step, is you have to evaluate all of your sources in concert with each other in order to come to some conclusions about what this person's name really was, or when and where this person was really born, or when and where this person died. It starts to get really messy if you put 3 or 4 different alternate birth facts or alternate death facts into a record. You want clean information as close to the truth as possible. And this, being able to rate your sources and start to understand them and evaluate them, is going to help you do that, come to some of those conclusions a lot better. Now, that doesn't mean you're not going to record that other information. In my case, I actually just record that other information in the notes fields. For each person, I transcribe the record. So I know what the record says. I know how it spelled their name and how old it said they were and where it said they were born. But then I analyze each piece of information and I make a determination about what I put in the name field or what I put in the birth date or birthplace field. That's part of the process of good genealogy. And hopefully for those of you who are new to this has been kind of an eye-opening opportunity for you to see where you can improve your skills. Improving your skills will actually lead you to more information and better information. It will help you grow your family tree and help you see that some of those brick walls are maybe paper thin and you can break right through them. For some of you who've been doing this for a while, I hope this was also useful information. Again, just to help you refresh your skills and start to look at some of that, those documents and that information that we collect in a new and better light so that we can build more accurate family trees. I always talk about having fun climbing your family tree, but I also want to make sure that you're climbing your own family tree and not somebody else's. So until next time, this is Crista Cowan. Have fun climbing your family tree.